So, we'll talk a little bit about technology, distractions, mindfulness, and a lot of themes I think that were just being hit on here. But we'll start with some meditation. And the encouragement is going to be to start and to continue with really just an attitude of curiosity through the whole experience. So I think sometimes considering distractions, it's like, okay, well, if I'm meditated, I'm just going to not be distracted at all. And instead, I want to encourage, we'll develop some, concentration, some mindfulness on the breath, but really being curious, almost like watching what the mind is doing throughout the meditation. So just as an intention, and finding any way to sit that feels good, relaxed, but upright if that's possible for you. And you can close your eyes if you'd like, or just rest your gaze on the floor in front of you. And to help settle in, we can take a few longer, slower, deeper breaths just to help the body arrive and to kind of release any maybe residual tension that the body's holding. Just kind of inviting this lower half of the lungs to open up a little bit, stretch out, release. Nothing forceful. And as you feel ready, just letting go of any control over the breath and letting it find a natural rhythm. Just allowing the body to breathe really however it wants to. And also in a way that feels comfortable, sustainable, relaxed. So bringing our awareness to the body, our attention to the breath, and letting the thinking mind fall just to the background of experience. So not pushing it away, but just kind of taking the power away from the thinking mind for this next 15-20 minutes. Really settling into how it feels to be in your body right now, as it is. And softening the attitude of the mind, and also softening the body. Really no separation between the mind and the body. Relaxing the forehead and the face, the scalp. Letting these eyes relax in the sockets. The muscles of the brain. And the jaw. Visualizing a downward, natural flow of the energy from a kind of top-down to a more bottom-up awareness. Letting the shoulders come back, the shoulder blades come together, and noticing how this can kind of open up the chest a little bit. Feeling the weight of gravity in the arms, the upper arms, the lower arms, the hands. And softening through the stomach, the chest, down through the belly, the lower abdomen, Strong back and a soft belly. Upright but relaxed. And continually just kind of visualizing the energy of the body just settling downwards. Sensing into the contact points with the cushion, the mat. Feeling the connection to the ground, to the earth. And softening through the upper legs. The knees down through the lower legs, the calves. All the way down through the feet. And just noticing the quality of the mind already. Again, coming back to this attitude of curiosity. And settling into a nice wide awareness of the body. We say awareness is global and attention is a little more local. So placing the attention on the movement of the breath in any way that feels supportive for you. So maybe that's in the belly or the chest, or it could be just kind of a wide sense of the body breathing. What is it like to be curious about the breath, to be interested in this thing that's happening all day, every day? Just noticing how the body really can breathe all on its own. What is it like to be in this living body right now? Heart beating all on its own. Respiration happening. Oxygen moving through the bloodstream. And just giving the mind some time and some space to really settle and reset. So every time the mind does wander off, nothing wrong is happening. Just being curious about that. What is happening? Noticing what the mind is doing. And just bringing it back home to this awareness. Which is happening through you. Not something we have to manufacture or create. Mindfulness is actually tuning into something that's already here. It's just a matter of recognizing it and practicing that recognition again and again with an attitude of patience, kindness, and interest. We'll spend these last few minutes in silence, really seeing if it can be possible to have a thread of continuity. Really being fully aware of whatever is happening now, in the present moment. As we come to a close, just offering any goodness that comes from this practice to be for the welfare, to the benefit of all beings. May it be for the welfare of this community. May it be a small drop in the bucket of the pain that's in this world, to promote acceptance, love, compassion for those that may be suffering. And may it play some small part in the mental, the spiritual health of this world. May all beings be free. So I'll share some thoughts, I guess, and then we'll open it up for this will provoke some discussion. The inspiration, I guess you could say, for what I wanted to share this evening came from like a really simple experience on Sunday. I was just taking the elevator into the basement of my building to do laundry. I was coming back up, and, this is probably a 20-second elevator ride or something like that. But I just, of course, picked up my phone, watch an amazing skateboard trick, then arrive at the floor, put my phone away. But I had this kind of flash of like, God, what just happened? This is so automatic. Like I don't even know if I made a decision to do what I just did. And then it made me think, like, how many times does this happen every single day, where my mind is just pulled almost like a zombie into some form of distraction, often fueled by phone, some kind of technology. And why? Why is that happening? And I was kind of curious about how to apply some Buddhist practices and meditation to distractions, to technology. And this is something I've been kind of working on myself for years. And something I wanted to say from the beginning is, like, definitely not to villainize technology. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with, phones and devices and computers, but just recognizing that there are some real challenges to mindfulness, if mindfulness being this kind of present moment awareness, when there's so many forces pulling the mind in different directions now. And it feels like not talking about it is kind of doing a disservice to what we're trying to cultivate here. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today, and how to bring some curiosity to what's happening, and recognizing maybe some of the ways the mind gets pulled away, and some practices for working with that. So there's this book called Deep Work. I don't know if anyone has read that book before or heard of it. An author, Cal Newport. One of the kind of main, I guess you could say, thesis of the book is that through the introduction of email, of Slack and social media, things like that, into the workplace, that it had a really big impact on people's ability to work and accomplish things. And one of his main things he talks about is that, like, every time the mind has to switch to a different task, it really depletes the mind's attention on what it was just doing. So it's really like there's this effect. The more the mind has to shift back and forth between things, it starts to, over time, deplete the quality of work that a single person is able to do. It takes additional effort to come back and settle back into something. And another book that's quite popular, has been for the last year or two, The Anxious Generation, by Jonathan Haidt, kind of explores this from a different perspective, and talks about how, in particular, how social media, how technology is having a huge impact on young people and in cognitive development. And that it's really starting to seep into every area of life. And it's having a huge impact on sustained attention, on creativity, on critical thinking, and on anxiety. This seems to be a correlation in the rise of the influx of technology and kind of the rise in anxiety in young people. So I don't know, this is probably not new news to a lot of people, but just kind of noticing the way that, like, technology can kind of almost play this role of, like, steroids for what they call the monkey mind in Buddhist thought, where the mind is just jumping from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. Kind of how technology can almost exacerbate that. And so, we could talk about adolescence, but I really think that as adults, we're still developing too. Human beings are always still developing, still growing. And so I think it's important to recognize some of the ways that these things are impacting the mind, particularly in a mindfulness practice, trying to develop meditation, trying to bring mindfulness into daily life. And I had this experience of, after coming up off the elevator, noticing how quick, my mind was distracted, of sitting down to prepare for this group. And I had an hour and a half to just read and reflect and write and not have any distractions. And notice just, like, how good that actually feels to have that time. And I understand that's also, like, a luxury at times, but, like, oh my God. I just have this, noticing the effect that it had in my mind to have some boundaries around technology and to really be deeply involved with something for a minute. Yeah, it gives the mind an increased capacity to deepen into things. So mindfulness, this word sati, the Pali word for it, is really in many ways like an antidote to distraction. And so this is like a Buddhist word, but it's just a very human faculty, right? Like awareness, attention. These are things that are, natural parts of being alive. But I guess what's unique about Buddhist practice is that there's an intentional training of that faculty, because there's so many things that can pull it away. And in kind of Buddhist philosophy, your awareness or your attention is really like the most valuable thing that you have. There are so many things in this life that are out of human control, but this is the one area where there's a sense of agency. And it's also, this is where, from the Buddhist perspective, where freedom happens, where liberation happens. This awareness starts to be freed up from the bonds of grasping, and this is said to point the heart, the mind, towards a deep sense of freedom and of peace. But there are a lot of hindering forces, of course, to that. The main hindrances that the Buddha always taught being craving, aversion, lethargy, restlessness, and doubt. So I was reflecting on those and listening to that list and thinking of how connected those are to distraction and to technology. And really how so many of the forces creating the technology or the apps know exactly how to prey on some of those things, to hijack the mind's sense of craving, the reward system in the brain, hijack a sense of anger or ill will or aversion. So this is not, to feel guilty, but just to kind of reflect on some of the ways that this happens and to be curious, maybe for yourself, how this may show up. So to start with craving, I was thinking about this, and the message that craving, particularly with technology, sends is that just being on an elevator or just talking to a friend or just watching a movie isn't enough. It's like I need more in this moment. What I'm doing here is somehow lacking. And so picking this thing up, particularly I'm talking about, use of phone, I guess, more than anything else right now. That's kind of the message that craving sends. More stimulation, entertainment, whatever it might be. Not necessarily inherently a bad thing, but how does that take away from what else might be happening? Even a moment of boredom or something, these like very normal human experiences. The word for craving is tanha in Pali, which means thirst. It's kind of endless, unquenchable thirst. And then aversion, the second hindrance. And I really feel like some of the ways that the phone plays in that is not wanting to feel what I'm feeling right now. Averse, feeling some way that I don't want to be feeling. This is my escape in this moment. And that could be the phone. It could be a lot of forms of technology, probably. And I feel like the message that this can send, if I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm picking up my phone, you're boring. I'm not interested in what you're saying, right? Some aversion to the conversation, that maybe not intentional, but that's the message that I think I'm sending sometimes when I'm doing that. And then lethargy said to be another hindrance, which is like this, kind of a natural part of human life. Low energy, dullness. How does distraction play into that? One thing that I've noticed for myself is that it can be extremely stimulating to the mind, especially particularly like reels, It's just like a highlight reel of the most exciting things that have possibly happened in any particular sport or in the world, right? So it has this kind of like hyper stimulating effect on the mind. It's something that I've noticed. I pick up, I'm a therapist, for those of you who don't know, and in between clients, sometimes I'll have a minute or two and I'll notice that I'll pick it up and just be like, God, that was 1 minute this is not how I wanted to spend that 1 minute. I just feel more spun out, and now I'm going back and having to talk to another person. And then this one, restlessness, which I feel like is really, really relevant. This quality of like, I don't know if you ever found yourself where it's just like, keeps going. This kind of like endless scrolling. And I think this is something that the social media apps really capitalize on. How to keep it so you just stay on the hook. Keep going, and keep going. And there's really no end to it. It's almost like a cycle in a way. There's this word samsara in Buddhist thought, which is said to be kind of like this circle of suffering. I don't know if you've ever found yourself in a circle of suffering of like, I keep coming back to the same thought or the same pattern or the same whatever. Noticing there's a real correlation in the way I scroll on my phone sometimes. The idea being like, it feels like it's going somewhere, but there's really no end to it. And then the last one being doubt. And just noticing how much comparison happens and self-doubt can happen for myself, and seeing, the kind of highlight reel effect that's happening and how that undermines maybe my own contentment or well-being of my life, because there's so much that could be better or different. It's so much information for the mind to take in. So how to practice with this? How to break free from this? One of the most central teachings in Buddhist thought is what's called renunciation, which may sound like something that's only for monks or nuns, which is a big part of monasticism, which is, taking robes, letting go of worldly desires, dedicating, to a spiritual life. But for people who are just practicing mindfulness or maybe interested in Buddhist meditation, can also be really relevant. And I think how that translates is finding ways to just simplify life. I've talked about this before, about like a sense of minimalism, finding areas of your life where things can be stripped down a little bit to create a little more space for the mind. And one way I think can be really helpful for this is setting boundaries around actual use of technology. And I sense that probably everyone here has experimented with this in one way or another. So not like a totally new idea, but some things that I've tried, had various levels of success with. Having a period in the morning when I wake up where I don't go to my phone first thing in the morning. Protecting my mind, because it's such an impactful time of the day. You've literally just woken up, and what's the first message that I want to send to the mind? Giving at least however long, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour, to shower, meditate, have some tea, whatever. Giving a little bit of a boundary there. And I especially notice this at the end of the day too. At a certain point when I can tell my mind is like just kind of done. It doesn't want any more stimulation. It's trying to wind down, but I'm like, wait, getting sucked back in, and noticing what that does to my mind is it's trying to get ready for sleep. So just exploring what those might be. And another thing too, which in a different book by this author, Cal Newport, called Digital Minimalism, simplifying what's on the phone, to simplifying what's on the device, right? Like what is helpful, what is a tool that I want to be using that is supportive, and what is kind of more just draining me, simplifying what's there. So that way, when I pick this thing up, there's more limited options. And I know that has had a huge impact for me in certain ways. Certain things that I've deleted and gotten rid of, that I look back, I'm like, I'm just only better off for that, actually. And a lot of the studies around social media actually show that people are often more depressed after 15 minutes of being on social media. And again, not to villainize it, I use it, I value it, I continue to use it to support, this group, for example, in various ways. But just trying to think of what ways, if I'm trying to cultivate, liberation and freedom in the mind and the heart, can I create some degree of renunciation, simplifying to support that? And another thing which I talked about a lot last week, which is just developing concentration, the ability for the mind to focus. So meditation can be really helpful for that. And it's kind of almost a revolutionary act, I feel like, in the modern world, to just sit down and not do anything for a while. It's really almost become a rare thing to have time where there's no stimulation. Because so much what happens, I know for myself, when I get home, one of the first things I want to do is just brainwash myself for a minute, just dole out, working all day, whatever it is. So meditation is really a valuable way to help the mind not lose touch with its ability to stay focused. I think that's a really empowering practice, particularly concentration, teaching the mind to stay with something simple and kind of boring like the breath, and finding beauty and joy in something that is so simple. It doesn't need so much stimulation. And this can be supportive in so many ways, like creativity, giving the mind room, not feeding it thing after thing, giving it room to be able to create, to think new thoughts. And then, of course, bringing mindfulness to what's happening. Investigation, this word gets thrown around a lot with mindfulness, which is being curious what the mind is doing, which is not always what I'm doing when I'm picking up my phone or scrolling in some kind of way. I'm really often quite the opposite, not being curious at all about what my mind is doing. So kind of an interesting thing to do. And I know in our discussion earlier, people had mentioned like bringing some degree of curiosity to what the algorithm is, how it's being fed. I think it's really interesting and supportive, and recognizing that there's this co-creating experience, right? The algorithm isn't just an external thing. There is a co-creation that's happening. One of the stats I looked up said that on average for Americans, pick up the phone 150 times a day. So I think about that, and for myself, I have a strong intention to practice meditation, but I know for a fact I'm not having 150 moments a day where I'm like, okay, being intentional and cultivating mindfulness in that way. So how can I lean the balance towards something that is really important to me? This is something I've really been thinking about a lot over the last few days. Yeah, and I think the other thing is noticing when the mind starts to hit that point of like, enough. Yeah, I think I'm done. And strengthening that facility, that ability to set something down too. Because again, this is not, I don't know, for myself, I'm not going to get rid of my phone. So that means I have to somehow create a healthy relationship to this thing. And that's going to be an evolving, continuous thing. So I know for myself, there are certain mindless things that I'm going to continue to do. And I think that there's value in them. There are times when I do want multiple forms of distraction happening, where I'm watching a show I'm not that interested in. I'm kind of mindlessly shopping and scrolling, and I don't want to vilify that. And it was interesting in my kind of research, I guess you could say, for this talk, there are actually studies that support the value of mindlessness too. The value of just like, I'm just going to completely zone out. It doesn't have to be on technology, but just really letting the mind turn to mush for a little bit. Important. As important as mindfulness is, important to have some time where I just letting go. So I know I'm going to continue to do some of that. But some intentions that I'm setting when I'm on the elevator, or when I'm on a minute break between clients, or when I'm talking to someone, I'm really trying to set an intention to not get pulled into that. That's just for me. Those are things that I'm noticing. I don't want to be pushing away boredom. I don't want to be looking at distractions in every break between every client I'm seeing in a day. And I want to be listening to someone when they're talking to me. And I'm not going to be perfect at that, but those are some areas in my life for me that I want to work on. And being intentional to some degree about how, when, and why I'm engaging with it. Why is it that I keep picking this thing up? Do I actually have an intention, or am I just, I don't know, it's just happening on autopilot in a way? Because a lot of times for me it's that, and I don't feel as comfortable with that. So I think that's kind of the most important message I guess I wanted to share, is just like, in what ways am I using technology, and in what ways am I being used by the technology? I think it's a really important distinction and something to kind of be curious about. I listened to a talk this morning on my way to work, where there's another teacher talking kind of about similar content, Matthew Brensilver. And he shared a story about a teacher working with like AT&T executives or something like that, and had them reflect on just their connection to their phones and the impact that it's kind of had. And he described this moment where this one woman, shared what she wrote down, kind of not realizing just the silence that it brought into the room when she said this. She said, 10 years ago, I turned my face for a moment, and it became my life. I thought that was really powerful. This idea of kind of getting lost in the blur of distraction, and how much of the beauty of life is being taken away by some of that. Losing years of your life